Hello, friends. Welcome back to the channel and to the Knowledge Worker podcast. Today we have Anton with us. He's currently a product designer, currently working with Evil Martian's agency. And this is an agency which builds custom solutions to start to finish. His journey started in the design world like more than a decade ago. Like he has worked with various firms and like designed more than 50 plus websites. Today, we will be discussing more on the intricacies of developer tools and optimizing them for better developer experience. And apart from design, Anton also creates like 3D renders. So his dribble is something that you should look at. That's really good and it's a must see. So, welcome to the podcast, Anton.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Anurag. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, everything is correct so far.
Yeah. So speaking about the journey, right? Just to give some context to the viewers, how did you get into like this sort of getting a hold over this sort of genre of design where dev tools is something like a really complex beast in itself. So how did you got into this, and how is your experience so far working on this sort of projects?
Yeah. You mentioned almost all my biography. I started in 2005 as just a regular website designer, and I designed just corporate websites and stuff. And after that, I decided to switch to more complex interfaces like social networks, information resources, all sorts of mobile interfaces. And in 2016, I joined Evil Martians. Yeah, and the main focus of Evil Martians are startups. So we work together with startup owners and basically build everything from scratch, starting from MVP and then with scaling to more audience and stuff. And main focus is startup dev tools, exactly. So I can say that from 2016 I work with mostly on dev tools. And you mentioned a lot of our clients, and I particularly worked with eBay for Business. It's an interface for sailors to list their products on eBay. Then Akiro, it's a security analyst tool that allows you to get insights about how secure your infrastructure is. And HTTPI, it's a API testing tool that allows you to enter your request data, run it, see the response and stuff.
If you tell to somebody, okay, this is like a dev tool, how do you classify a tool as a dev tool or not, and how is it different from a regular app?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a question that I think a lot in my free time, and I apply quite a broad definition to a dev tool. So for me, DevTool, it's not a IDE or terminal interface. It's basically everything that you can use for creating something. A tool, an interface that gives you an empty canvas, and you can use this canvas to translate your ideas from your brain into this canvas. I consider a DevTool. That's easy.
So yeah, definitely that's a really good definition. That basically it's like a wider range compared to a
Yeah.
traditional Outlook. Right. So when we see like okay, dev users, what are the requirements of a developer or typical power user compared to a regular somebody who goes through a journey?
Yeah. Right. So DevTools, it's a product for creation, and what is left? And what is left is basically products for consumption. It's all sorts of social networks, these corporate websites that I designed at the beginning of my journey, and everything like news letters, websites, and other things. So and these are regular users who consume goods to with the information, I don't know, videos and stuff. And other group is developers who use dev tools. And yeah, as I said, I apply quite a broad definition. So even a designer who use Figma in a way is a developer. Even if a person who open, I don't know, Google Docs, for example, and starts creating some text, it's also sorts of developer. They need to convert their ideas in their brain into something tangible. So these are two groups: developers and non-developers, consumers. So what's the difference between them? Consumers, they usually consume something in a linear way. So they open a website, they kind of find something that is interesting for them and just consume basically. And developers, they don't interact with the interface in a linear way. They can open your product, start creating something, then delete it, then start creating another day from the scratch, and they can do these like multiple iterations. And yeah, basically it's quite chaotic user path. And that's the main difference between developers, users of dev tools, and regular users, users of consumer-facing products. Another big difference is even like if we consider a Facebook consumer-facing product and like Figma, I think that developer tools, like generally, if we consider a kind of group of these products, dev tools are more frequently used on everyday basis. So you open your tool, if you're a designer, you open Figma like every day, every working day, and yeah, use it regularly. And on the other hand, like websites like e-commerce, for example, you open it, yeah, not so frequently. You open it like once, I don't know, a week, once a month, depending on your consumption level. And so yeah, that's the main difference. Everyday usage. And these everyday usage, it means that even a tiny kind of friction that these products can cause, it basically adds up with huge amounts of time that user wastes on dealing with this friction. And that's a crucial thing. That's one of the points that you need to think about regularly while designing developer tools. And the last one that I can say that dev tool are rarely the only one tool, one product that a developer use every day. Meaning, if you are a designer, you use Figma, you use I don't know, maybe Photoshop for some reason, or a browser to check something. And so yeah, basically you combine multiple tools and you constantly switch between them back and forth during your day. And that's what like happens a lot with developers, and happens not so much with regular users. Again, regular user can watch some videos on YouTube, then open a e-commerce website, then open I don't know, Facebook, and switch between them. But these are independent streams. You are buying something, then you decide to watch some videos, then you get bored, you open Facebook and stuff like that, and you switch between these contexts, but they are independent. Developers, they also switch between multiple websites, but they are parts, chains, like elements of the same chain. So you need to open your terminal and perform some command, then you need to go to the browser to see the results of this compilation, then you need to go to your IDE to fix something, and like you do this in conjunction. That's the last thing that I want to highlight here.
Yeah, definitely. Basically, it's like somebody who's juggling a lot of things, and no matter what they want to accomplish something, like maybe configuring something, and then they might use like, okay, whatever tools are available in their arsenal. Maybe their
Exactly.
company So when it comes to developers, right, developer productivity, burnout overall, with again with in these times, it has become a, a discussion point of discussion. But
Hmm.
how can like a thoughtful design, and like you also mentioned about productivity, right, where the
Yep.
design helps somebody who's logging into an app or a product daily,
Hmm.
they have to go through a specific process daily. And if it's friction, if there's a
Yep.
lot of friction, there might be frustration that starts creeping in. And then combine that with some deadline, then it would be even more difficult. So
Yep.
how do you manage that? Like, how do you make sure that the productivity of a developer is only increased, and what are the considerations in that?
Hmm. Um, yeah, that's a tough question. Um, so first of all,
Because
you
generally
don't.
basically a
Yeah.
lot of configuration, right, and a lot
Yeah.
of information that they have to gather and like process to do their work. So how do you manage that that trade-off between showing a lot of info versus like
Hmm.
the stuff done? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So first of all, you never know what makes your users productive
Hmm.
until you talk to them, right? Until you ask them, like, what's your daily like process? What tasks do you perform and stuff like that. And yeah, speaking about the overload and like productivity, this kind of balancing. Yeah, what's the problem? The problem is that a developer, like a spheric developer, might want two absolutely contradictory things at the same time. One of them is getting as much information as possible, because this information drives their like action. You see, I don't know, some reports in your console, and you make a decision that you need to do something, like perform some commands. And another like a edge of the spectrum is focus, because that's what all we need. We need to, when we like find points that we want to work on, we need to be focused on that in order to make it like as efficient as quickly as possible. And these are two, like, yeah, basically two edges of the same slider. You can't put your slider at the same time into these both extremities. You need to choose some value on this slider. And you, as a developer of a dev tool, you never know what will work for some particular user, which means that you need to do like a default setup that works for this 80% of all your users, and then give a setting to a user. So some particular person who needs a lot of information, their like cognitive ability is so high that they can manage a lot of information. They will just adjust the look of your tool that brings all this information at the same viewports, and they will feel comfortable. And another person who needs to be focused, who can't deal with such a lot of information, they will adjust it in another direction, and they will hide everything that they don't need currently. So my philosophy is here that uh, don't be afraid of settings and make it as flexible as possible. That's actually a problem for designers, because we when iPhone and iOS came out, we got into this philosophy that settings is bad. Like, if you have a setting, that means that you didn't um, think through thoroughly your interface. You did a bad job. So that's what we kind of uh, get into our brain subconsciously. And for DevTools, it's like an opposite. Settings are good. Settings allow you to make a comfortable workspace. That's basically like a adjustable chair in car that's you can decline and put a little bit higher. That's what you need to do. And a comfortable chair that every user can set up for their needs, and that will be the balance between overload and productivity.
Right, because like many times when we are designing, we often hit like a point where we have to decide, okay, this is required, but this is not required all the time. So at that
Exactly.
time we have to use like tricks like, okay, using an accordion where it collapses, or if it's something like above the table, you collapse it so that you don't see the stats all the time, but if you require, you can open it. So I think those types of tricks are really helpful.
Mhm.
Overall, I feel like overall, if you go to and approach a project in terms of dev portals, like developer related tools and everything, it's best like when somebody approaches you in terms of clients and all, they have a specific task in their mind. Okay, I want to configure X. So
Mhm.
you have this standard user journey, and then you
Yep.
have this, okay, a way like dividing into 10 steps that has to be done. So how do you approach your process of designing? Like, do you how do you approach that, like complex technical requirements, and how do you process that as a designer? Because there's a lot of discussion in design whether that you should be able to code or not. So if somebody, there's a designer who is venturing into this territory, is coding knowledge required, or is there something else that they should look at, and what is
Mhm.
your process to understand this complex technical requirement?
Mhm. Well, I think that there are two parts of this question. One of them is complex technical requirements because the subject area is complex. Like if you are designing something for machine learning stuff that you never get into, that's one problem, right? And another part of this question is like technical constraints that I call. For example, we use some components which has their limitations, and you need to take them into account when designing something that uses this component. So the first one, these complex subjects area, well, talk to your clients, because your clients know this area because they build a product in this area. So that's the one source. Just talk, ask how this work, why it's important, how people currently, if you build something like completely new that doesn't exist on the market right now, ask them, all right, you're going to digitalize some process, what this process look like right now, what people do, how they solve these problems right now. I don't know, maybe they use some Google Sheets or Google Docs or something like that, or paper. Just understand how physically people deal with this problem, and you will understand how the interface should look like. That's the one source. Another source is competitor analysis. If it happens that you build something that has some competitors already on the market, just study them, look at what they do, how they solve their problems, and basically, I would say, don't hesitate to copy. Just do the same, apply your knowledge, how to improve it, because every time there is a place to improve something that you understand. Like you see that your competitors did something, but I don't know, the UI is ugly. So apply your knowledge to make it cool, and you already will give your users some additional value of a beautiful interface. And later, like if you continue working with with this project with these clients, later you will understand the subject area, and you start see that, all right, I have two competitors and they have like version A and version B to solve the same problem, and you will start seeing which version is better, or maybe there is a version C that no one implemented, and that's the solution that you need to design. So this is about dealing with complex subject area and dealing with technical constraints. Well, I think that's what works, and what works for me. I just start digging into these libraries and start creating demo using these libraries, just to see what's the capabilities of these libraries, what they can do, what they can't, what can be done, but with a lot of hacks, and which means that maybe it's not the best theme to design. So yeah, basically try to implement it yourself very quickly, very like roughly and dirty, but at least you will understand the constraints. And yeah, the second thing how to deal with these technical constraints, it's yeah, design exploration. When you again look at your competitors, and if you know that they use the same components, you can see what they implemented, which means that it is possible to implement, and that's what you can implement as well. Yeah, something like that.
Right. For me, what helped really is like dabbling into generally like unrelated no code tools and building something on it, because if something is technical, like even in terms of data, when
Hmm.
you are using anything to build like a tool, like some simple as a like a Airtable, it
Hmm.
gives you a perspective of okay how things should work. And then once you go approach a project and somebody tells you, oh, we need to configure this data, then that mental model gets built if you are playing around with no code tools. And
Yeah.
yeah, but speaking of no code tools, generally what when somebody is making a dev tool, right? They are
Hmm.
putting abstraction layer over something which is in front of them, which is like maybe a config file. So you are
Yeah.
putting an interface to visualize this better. If they have a log, they're putting a dashboard on top of it to visualize it better. So
Right.
to what degree do you generally suggest somebody, like if somebody approaches and you're tackling something, to what degree do you add these abstraction layer? At what point should we think, okay, this is enough, after this we should just give them a code block and then let them
Hmm.
do the developer thing? So because
Yeah.
even something like a even like a JSON, you can build it as an entire tree, but you can just give that
Yeah.
code block
Hmm.
to them. So how do you
Yeah.
approach those type of scenarios?
Well, I like how quite the same thing is solved by macOS. Because if you think about it, macOS is just this abstraction layer, UI layer on top of Unix system. And macOS allows you to perform a lot of things using UI, but not everything that exists um, under the hood, right? And you can access these all the possibility, all the features of Unix system by terminal. So you just enter some commands and you get something that doesn't has no exposure to UI. And I think that's it's a good trick. It's a good move that you can use for dev tools as well. So you build UI with this abstractioning uh, as deep as it is required by your clients, by your users, by the market, and so on. But also you need to think about something that's like a pantry door that allows you to enter these underlying uh, stores, uh, code that allows you to perform something that doesn't have a representation in the UI. So I think that's a good balance. You just make the tool that looks and works as you want, but you think about these additional features that are accessible by something more advanced. Yeah.
Right, definitely. Basically, it's everything comes down to requirements, and then maybe when if you're working with some team who's working on a tool, creating a tool, you have
Hmm.
developers there as well. So I think what generally we do internally is that once I make something with our backend or front end developer, we sit down and get first hand feedback from them itself. Okay, what is a good to have and what is like a required thing. So I think definitely that helps a lot.
Yeah.
Generally, yeah, you mentioned that you uh, do a research when you get a project, and then you look at alternatives for the same
Hmm.
project. In your research, what are the recent trends? Anything that you must have noticed? Like, what are the current
Mm.
trends in developer tools or in this genre
Yeah.
that you must have noticed?
Right. Um, well, the first one, the most obvious, I believe, is beautiful UI. So
Hmm.
something that looks beautiful are definitely in trend. Yeah, and it has actually quite good reason behind it. It's not just a beautiness of the interface. Again, I have thought about it a lot, and I came into conclusion that um, so basically, what is a dev tool? A dev tool is your data. That's something that you put time on bringing something, creating something, and these data are priceless. That's something that was taken from your brain, somehow converted into some letters and shapes, and it's very stressful to think about this as it can gone one day, which leads us to the to this. Dev tool should look solid. It should look as it is reliable. It doesn't like have some UI glitches. It doesn't have some I don't know, some unexpected behavior and stuff. So that's what a part of beautiful UI that I'm thinking about. The interface should look solid. It should give your users trust so they can basically trust and start investing their time into bringing their data into this. That's the first trend. For example, you can take Linear. Linear has a beautiful interface. It's well thought. It doesn't have at least obvious glitches or some illogical parts and stuff. And also another reason why you need to invest into beautiful UI is that that's actually eliminates a little bit overload, visual overload, because if you have a lot of information and this information is chaotic, it doesn't follow some understandable design system that regulates spaces, sizes, and stuff, it adds more and more unnecessary information. So you see that the font is like different into different parts, but it doesn't encode any signal. There is this hypothesis that the theory about signal and noise, it just adds noise to the interface. So that's a beautiful UI. That's definitely a trend. Another trend, a lot of shortcuts and these kind of blending into OS ecosystem. So application tries to look like native application and use the most features of operating system, which are like extensive usage of right mouse click, for example, for entering the context menu, which is not so very common for pure web environments, right? So that's also a thing. Then you mentioned no code, and I think that's a big trend. More and more people come into, basically developers, and they cannot have a lot of technical background, so they can't work with codes and stuff like that. So no codes, it's a way how you can broaden your audience and be more accessible for more people. And the last one, AI, but AI, it's a trend for everything, but AI works especially well for codes, and it can generate a lot of help, like these copilots. So yeah, that's a definitely thing that you need to think about including into your dev tool. It can just solve a lot of routine for the user and free up some time for creativity.
Definitely, linear has been like in even in design community, it has like being a very specific use case, but it has gained a lot of popularity amongst even designers, uh, thanks to its UI. And then again, that the point that you mentioned about it could look like a native app.
Mm-hmm.
uh, Linear specifically has given some, like even the shortcuts. For
Yeah.
example, many people who are like power user, they rely on shortcuts, especially Blender users. if you see
Yeah.
Blender amongst like the most complex apps.
Yeah.
And when you go to YouTube just to look for when Blender tutorials, they'll first thing they'll say that okay, learn shortcuts. So I think that's
Yes.
definitely
Yes.
a plus
Yeah.
when it comes to designing of that.
Blender, it's a good example of very nice design. I mean, visually you might not like it. It's not so polished, but for open source product, it looks beautiful. It looks much better than Cinema 4D and other non open source 3D editors. But what I love in Blender is that it's really flexible. I mentioned previously that give your users ability to adjust the workspace for their needs, and Blender is a king of customization of the interface. You can bring as many panels as you want. You can adjust them as you want. You can set up like any. Basically, if you remember Photoshop back in the days, they had quite similar concepts of workspaces, I believe that they called, and you could turn into workspace of animator, for example, and the panel with timeline appeared at the bottom. But it was kind of static. It was like, yeah, it was early days, and Blender, they brought this idea into like a space level. You can even I just adore this feature, and I want to use it like in every my product. They allow you to scale up the content of each panel independently. So if you press Command and scroll your mouse wheel, it basically like changes the shape, and that's flexibility that helps you to make the content a little bit smaller, but it fits to the panel. You don't need to scroll it. You see all the controls at the same time. That's a perfect example. I love Blender.
Definitely, like especially with the 4.1 update, they have put like another layer where okay, they have increased the spacing and everything, that minor fixes that you were mentioning. Apart from
Mm-hmm.
that, even select like okay, what is the base font and base size of it. So and you see that in a lot of other developer tools like IDE especially, is where you can set up your own theme like base font, base size, whatever, and then it becomes your own. So I think that sort of quirk, more or less like developers have it more because they're
Mm-hmm.
used to customizing things, so they want that their ID or their tool to look their own.
Exactly. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. Previously, you mentioned like okay, there's even when you are designing like a complexity, you have to take into consideration. Now, if you go through a typical developer's journey, you'll encounter like for their own in for a manual developer who is working with an ID or a sort of a
Mm-hmm.
code, it's everything is seamless in terms of input, but when it comes to like an interface, there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of friction, like inherent friction, because you will have those fields separated. So how do you tackle those problems where there's a lot of input required with,
Mm-hmm.
and especially in the cases where in reality it's like a single config file, but you're making an interface out of it. So how do you tackle those things, because there's a lot of input required and there's a lot of completion of forms, long forms.
You mean inputs like UI inputs, right?
Yeah.
And
So for
what?
example, for taking a configuration into mind, it would require like something like a field with a URL and then some key value, because a lot of things are involved in that. So in
Yeah.
those cases, it's a lot of effort and feels like there's a lot of input from the user. So how do you make sure that it's at least it's bearable or an easy in for a given user?
Mm, well, so basically we are discussing long forms, right?
Hmm.
And well, if this form does a lot of um, things that I want to
Hmm.
get, I think a user will not have a big
Hmm.
trouble with entering this. But if we try to like think about how we can optimize it, I would say that like entering the modes where all these UI inputs converts into a JSON, for example, will help a lot, because you might have these JSONs prepared in advance, and you can just paste it as a single action, and you will get this form completed with just one shortcut. That's one of the solution. Another thing that I want to implement someday is like single history for the full form. Because if you especially if it's not a form that you just fill and submit and like forget about it, if it's something that you work frequently, so you create it, then you open it again to change some data, then save it and like do it multiple times. In this case, a single history for the full form might help, because like normally browser allows you to do Control Z only when you are focused in the field. So it stores history for some particular field, and you can't undo all the fields get into the states like to original state. So you open this form that you filled previously, and you decide to change it somehow. You changed multiple inputs, and you need a way to get back. So one of the ways just have a cancel button that just discards all these not saved changes. But what if you want to undo like 10 steps and keep 30 that you performed before without discarding them? You need to go into each field and press this Control Z. So that's what can help with dealing with this form, having a global history for the full form that allows you to undo multiple steps. Yeah, if I understand your question correctly, that's how we would answer it.
Definitely, like generally, if there's a config file, because we also have similar functionality where instead of configuring something like a gateway, you give a file and then it configures. So it's a pretty easy step, and generally because the user has an habit to use their text editor, right? So they would know
Yeah.
if they know the structure, if they are familiar with it, it would be easier for them. And again, one more point to add here is that generally what people like, if you show a screen to somebody, they would, on the face of it, they would say, okay, this is a lot of data input. But one more thing to consider is that the user here is really high intent. So
Mm-hmm.
the user is not to like watch something at the end of that, like their intent is to fill that. So
Yep.
that's added context here.
Mm-hmm.
Apart from that, you like, given these times where there's a rise of AI, there's a lot of tools integrating AI into it. What do you think is the future of something like a developer tool, or these field where a lot of human check is also involved, but there's a lot of automation is getting introduced? So
Mm-hmm.
in times, how do you approach like something like this use case where you have to be careful, and how would AI change this field in terms
Mm-hmm.
of interface and developer tools?
Well, let me make a step back. First of all, I think that future of developer tools is VR, because the
Mhm.
main problem, again, that's the same that I explained with this slider, that you can't be at the same time into two extremities. The same applied to the space.
Mhm.
So you, at the same time, you want as bigger canvas as possible, and
Mhm.
at the same time, you want as much additional information that helps you to work with this canvas as possible. Yeah, take in Figma, for example, you want as bigger the space where you can draw, but also you want a bigger library, the list of the layers, and the panel that allows you to change font colors and stuff. And virtual reality helps to eliminate this problem, like absolutely, like at the roots of this problem. I don't remember the name. So I have Oculus 2, and there is a 3D editor that you basically add. You create the 3D model in like a 3D space. That's very natural, but also it gives you a palette, a basically toolbox that is attached to your hand, so you can bring it to your field of sight and work with these tools, or you can move it away. And that solves the problem that I mentioned right now, like completely. You have an infinite
Mm.
canvas right behind your eyes, and you can bring as much tools when they need to your field of sight. And I believe that's a future. That's not just a toy. VR is not toy. I believe
Mm.
that it's a real future of dev tools. And speaking of your AI, well, to be honest, I don't think that AI is a like threat to developers, because developers, um, like if a developer develops something that was created like
Mm.
thousands of times, yeah, the AI will take their job. But in most cases, if you think about a kind of a normal developer, right? They create something new that didn't exist before. Right before this call, I played with one of the library, and I use ChatGPT to get into this. And ChatGPT currently like hallucinates a lot,
Mhm.
so it can't like this. Um, I have an idea that I want to implement using some library. I don't know if it's even possible in this library. And I ask ChatGPT, and it gives me some prompts that kind of it might work. Like try this, but it doesn't, because that the library works differently, and you need to go and read real documentation. And the most importantly, what ChatGPT can't do so far is uh, like basically it's a work of inventor. When you have two pieces that exist like separately, and you find a way how to combine them to get something that didn't exist before. That's what a developer like does like frequently and a lot. And that's what AI currently can do.
Mm.
So AI can just give you some prompts on how to perform that was done previously. That was they learned, but they can't give you a hint how to combine something in order to achieve some functionality that didn't exist before.
Right.
So yeah, I think that AI is just a good helper. Yeah, definitely you need to use it, but yeah, it
Yeah.
definitely not a threat.
Yep. Like what I think in terms of AI is like many times there are many repetitive things within your workflows itself, right? So
Hmm.
maybe it can have get you a scaffolding of what you want to do, and then you put in the details from with your context. So that basic things that are defaults or which are very contextual but repetitive. So I think
Yeah,
those things would really help in especially in the interface part of the dev tool, where
yeah,
it would fill in your whatever like basic things like base path or something, and then you
yeah.
start from.
That's right.
And when you mentioned uh, VR, right?
Hmm.
Now you must have seen all those demos of apps in Apple Vision
Yeah,
Pro. But what I
yeah,
think is lacking here is that what they have done, like at least from the current version, is a lot of windows have come into 3D space, which is again
yeah.
restriction. And when I imagined something like a VR interface, I would imagine something like a again like a literal dashboard like
Uh
around
huh.
the in a circular format and
Yeah,
something
yeah.
you see here. So I think that's
Hmm.
still in process where even though you have an infinite thing, the interfaces are still in rectangulars. Like
Yeah.
why that one thing is not like a 3D sort of a interface in
Uh
there.
huh. Um.
That is
Well.
something
Yeah.
might they might consider in future, which everything coming out and then app not
Yeah.
restrained to a window.
Yeah, I think that's yeah. We're talking right now about Apple Vision Pro, and they have quite big limitation that they want to make it compatible with as many applications as possible. Because if Apple Vision Pro, if somebody buys it and it's basically empty, you can't. There is no applications yet. You will not have a reason to buy it, right? And they want to get as many things into it, so it is useful right now. But I think that eventually it will use the full capability of 3D space around you, like at 100. And Oculus, they didn't have this problem because it was developed by Meta, and they didn't have a lot of applications that they can bring, so they built everything from scratch. So they didn't have these limitations, and all these applications are basically uh, in a 3D environment. So something they kind of repeated this window approach, that there is a window with buttons, which basically web view, I believe. But there are lots of applications that exists like basically around you without these conventional UIs with buttons on the windows and stuff. And yeah, that feels much better. But again, we need to think about the environment for developers, like code, to write code in like full 3D space is not like a, but maybe somebody will create some interface that uses this third dimension for, I don't know, iterating over like versions of documents or something like that. But basically you need a 2D sheet that's just a window. So yeah, it depends on what you're building for the R. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the best version would be like, even though like the first and the easiest version would be just to have your analytics in 3D, like
Yeah.
having like a three-dimensional
Yeah.
chart, like
Exactly. Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so to wrap up the discussion, just wanted to know like how has working on these type of tools changed the way you think in terms of design? So compared to what you when you started working on the websites,
Hmm.
now that you have so many projects in dev tool space under your belt, how has your thinking changed when you work?
Hmm. Right. So first of all, I started thinking about everything that I design in from the perspective of systems like design systems. Like I create these components at the very early stage of, even if I design a landing, for example, it's much easier to have a uh, the clearly defined system for spaces, for example, or for font sizes, and reuse them a lot. Previously, when I just started to design, I used this completely different approach. Um, I thought that it's much important how it looks like how a person perceives the interface. So I kind of used a lot of visual um, how to say it, yeah, visual compensations. Like for example, if I have a button with fully rounded sides, I would have a negative margin to it, so it feels like it is aligned along the vertical line. I used a lot of compensations in colors. So if you have a color that's applied to the big space, it is perceived in one way, and next to it you have the same color applied on text. It is perceived lighter if it's placed against a white background. So I applied a darker color to this text to compensate this, and I played a lot with this. That was my philosophy, that it doesn't matter how like is under the hood in the styles, but it matters how it is perceived by eyes. When I started to work on developer tools, I realized that you can't apply these in a scalable manner. So every element is basically a handcrafted stuff with some hard-coded these negative compensations, and I ditched them. So currently I just build a design system that is consistent without these exclusions, overridings, and stuff, but it works the best as it can. So it looks good, and it is much easier to work with because you don't need to deal with a lot of some irregular values. I think that's the main thing that I learned from DevTools.
Right. Two quick questions and sort of like fun ones. So which one is your favorite? Is it like the dark mode or light mode?
Yeah. Dark mode.
Yeah, I think generally over the time dark mode has become the favorite. And yeah, and which are the three, two to three, one of your favorite tools which have really good designs in this space?
Mhm. Well, I like all the products by JetBrains. These like ADs, IntelliJ, something like that.
Mhm.
Figma, yeah. I love things that's not like a real dev tool. That's a to do tracker, but in a way it helps you to be more productive. So it's definitely not for consumption, at least. So they are like they are gods in terms of interface. Their interface so clean, so well built and stuff. So yeah, I love it. And I mentioned Blender. Yeah, I love their approach for making it as flexible as possible. So they are gods in their field.
Yeah, definitely many things to learn from those tools. Thank you, Anton, for your time, and it has been a really great in-depth conversation about, okay, what is a dev tool, how do you approach it, what are the nitty-gritties of it, and definitely if the world and more designers venture into designing, their contribution is actually increasing like the developer productivity and in terms helping the business. So this is really a appealing way to approach a project and venturing into. Yeah, so any final thought that you want to share, do you want to share with the audience? Where would you find, where would they find you? Anything that you want to share?
Um, Not really. I shared everything. So thank you very much, all the listeners, for this 1 hour run. So yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your time. I'll see you next one. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.